Breaking news. How the Russian invasion might end, why he's thankful for American support, and why Putin is vulnerable are all topics that interest Zelenskyy. In a recent, in-depth interview from Kiev with ABC News, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy vowed never to accept Russian demands for territorial concessions, including the illegally annexed Crimean Peninsula, but he also left the door open to a different resolution to the conflict that has lasted for 500 days. The Washington Post reported that during a recent visit to Kyiv, Ukrainian officials told CIA Director William Burns that the goal of a new counteroffensive is to approach the Crimean boundary and then force Russian President Vladimir Putin into negotiations. In an interview with ABC News chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz that aired on Sundays this week, Zelenskyy did not dispute these claims. In response to Raddatz's question about the feasibility of this, Zelenskyy said, "Well, it is absolutely clear, logical rhetoric that at that moment when Ukraine will reach the administrative border with a temporarily occupied Ukrainian peninsula, Crimea, it is very likely that Putin will be forced to seek dialogue with the civilized world, unlike how it was before the full-scale invasion, because he will be weakened." Speaking with Raddatz, Zelenskyy, his top advisor Andriy Yermak, and some of Ukraine's most senior generals answered his questions about the invasion, which began in February 2022. They talked about the ongoing counteroffensive, the Wagner mercenary mutiny, and the possibility of negotiations. Despite what Zelenskyy called dangerous signals in U.S. politics about reducing aid for Ukraine at a crucial time in the conflict, he stressed the importance of America's continued support for his country. Joe Biden has publicly assured Zelenskyy that he will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes, and he promised more aid, including the controversial shipment of cluster munitions last week. Mike Pence, a former vice president, visited Kyiv on June 29 and, in a move that set him apart from some of his fellow candidates for the Republican presidential nomination, expressed his unwavering support for Ukraine. However, some members of the GOP have questioned the extent of the sustained military and financial commitment to Ukraine. Are you worried about the outcome of the presidential election and the future of aid in any way? Raddatz had questioned Zelenskyy. It's a domestic, or internal, policy matter. I would hate to intervene in what the Americans decide, Zelenskyy said. However, keeping Ukraine's bipartisan support is crucial for us. We are aware that some U.S. politicians are sending potentially harmful signals about cutting aid to Ukraine. Former President Donald Trump has said on multiple occasions that he would end the war within 24 hours, a claim that Zelenskyy has also downplayed. It's beautiful that all you want is to end the war, Zelenskyy said. However, this longing must be grounded in actual experience. It would appear that Donald Trump has already spent that day in his lifetime. Even though it wasn't a major conflict, we were at war, and he certainly had the time on his hands to do so. He clearly had other things on his mind. I believe that in this way Biden could have brought it to an end even in 5 minutes, as Zelenskyy put it. If we are talking about ending the war at the cost of Ukraine, in other words to make us give up our territories. However, we do not concur. If you're an American who is skeptical of continued aid and would rather focus on domestic issues, here's what Ukraine's president has to say to you. I value the opinions of those who think you've accomplished enough. Please know that I value any assistance given to me. We Ukrainians are not known for having insatiable appetites, so we know when enough is enough. It's enough that we won. Recently, Ukraine has begun a counteroffensive in the east, and the supply of Western weapons and munitions has been crucial to this effort. Although the operation has been slow, two top generals told ABC News that the Ukrainian forces are going to plan, as they probe areas along the front line, which stretches for thousands of miles. The counteroffensive is proceeding, slower than we'd hoped, according to Colin Kahl, the Pentagon's top policy official, who added on Friday that the Russians probably were more successful in digging in more deeply than perhaps was fully appreciated. Kahl and Zelenskyy agree on the situation. However, Zelenskyy insists the Russians are now on the defensive because Ukrainian forces have not yet deployed in full. He claimed he is under no pressure at all to speed up the counteroffensive, despite reports that some Western officials are growing impatient with the current pace of events. In a similar operation last year, the Ukrainians quickly retook territory from Russia. Today, the initiative is on our side, Zelenskyy said to Raddatz. We're making progress, albeit not as quickly as we'd like. But we are making progress. According to daily intelligence updates provided by the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence on the state of the war, Ukraine has made steady gains in the strategic city of Bakhmut, which was one of the few symbolic victories for Russia in their winter offensive, which cost tens of thousands of lives and countless injuries. When asked if he was confident in retaking the city, General Alexander Syrsky, commander of the Ukrainian ground forces overseeing the battle in the east, told Raddatz, "Yes, of course. That's for sure." Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy talks with ABC News chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, in Kyiv. In Kyiv, Martha Raddatz, ABC News chief global affairs correspondent, spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. ABC News, Yuri Boyko. There have been reports of heavy casualties and destruction of Western military equipment in the south, but Zelenskyy and his generals agree that it is still too early in the counteroffensive to declare victory. Cluster munitions, explosives that some 120 countries have banned due to their capacity to do indiscriminate damage to civilians, were controversially approved for delivery to Ukraine by the Biden administration last week. However, the delivery of F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine remains on the country's wish list. The head of the presidential office and one of Zelenskyy's top advisors, Andriy Yermak, told ABC News that Ukraine could succeed without the jets, but at the cost of more lives, in response to Raddatz's questions about cluster munitions and F-16s. "We only inquire about vital matters," he explained. "We demonstrated the outcomes of our efforts, and how we put this technology and these weapons to use. We'll need them to end up on top in this war, of course." Sunday on ABC's This Week, John Kirby, a spokesman for the Biden administration, said, "We're going to work to get those jets to Ukraine just as quickly as possible. However, you've got to get the pilots trained." He warned that it will take some time to get these pilots ready to go. Concerning nuclear war, Vladimir Putin, and the Wagner uprising, fears for the safety of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is under Russian control, and the Kremlin's saber-rattling both bring up the specter of nuclear weapons as the conflict continues. The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, stated last week that all of Russia's promised tactical nuclear weapons would be deployed in Belarus by the end of the year. Belarus shares a border with Ukraine. Although he disagreed with Raddatz's assessment that Putin would use nuclear weapons, Zelenskyy did warn that the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, located in Zaporizhia, may have been mined in advance of a fake explosion meant to halt Ukrainian military advances. The International Atomic Energy Agency of the United Nations has stated that it has not seen evidence to support Ukraine's claims and has demanded more open access to the facility. "Are there any extra explosives there?" Zelenskyy replied, "Yes. Are they able to detect bombs right now? No. How many? Objective people are available to assess the level of mine contamination at the site? No." This interview was conducted at a time when there was talk of Belarus serving as a base for an assault on Ukraine's northern border. After an attempted coup led by the Putin-aligned Wagner mercenary group failed, its members were given the choice between signing contracts with the Russian military, going home to their families, or accepting Lukashenko's offer to relocate to Belarus, where Lukashenko claims to have established bases, based on satellite imagery. Zelenskyy, on the other hand, has expressed confidence that Wagner troops will not attack from the north and has suggested that Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin is acting out of a desire to boost his own standing in Russia. "That's what I conclude, rationally speaking. He's risen to prominence in politics," Zelenskyy said. "And I think this was probably his main goal. Can you tell me why he stopped? I can't say for sure, though." Wagner's forces advanced to within 120 miles of Moscow, encountering little resistance along the way, before calling off the mutiny in late June. According to Zelenskyy, Putin's leadership was exposed as weak because of Prigozhin's rebellion. Prigozhin has stated that the march to Moscow was not an attempt to stage a coup, but rather to protect his fighters from injustice. After they decided to stop themselves, Zelenskyy declared victory. Putin does not have an effective military at home, and the Russian people are in danger. It's possible that there will be another uprising in Russia, he said. To add insult to injury, more than that, there are many people who might support such a mutiny.